And as George said, I spoke to the IET almost exactly 5 years ago now, March 2021. A little bit of a different world back then. I don't know if any of you remember, but there was this thing called COVID that was going around. It's largely forgotten now, it's all fine. But also we were in very different places as a country. At the time, this is what we said we wanted to do. This is updated branding, but basically a slide that we presented back in 2021. We wanted to do three things. Deploy a full fibre infrastructure, intelligent full fibre network. Transform the digital capabilities of the networks of this nation's citizens and spark innovation. And I think I'm going to argue tonight that we're well on our way to delivering all of these goals. This is a continuation from 5 years ago. None of this happened accidentally. We decided to do this and we've very deliberately taken steps to deliver that through the engineering that we put in place, through the decisions we've made as to how we're going to build and run this network. This is where we were 5 years ago. A little over 500,000 homes that we've built. And if you step forward 5 years, we're sort of heading towards 5 million homes across the UK. At the time, Openreach had a soft ambition to build towards 20 million fibre homes. Virgin Media was saying very strongly that it would never need to do fibre and that HFC was exactly the right thing. About 4 months after this talk, BT announced it was going to guarantee 25 million homes built, which is the current target. And Virgin at the same time that July said, launched a program called Mustang to upgrade all of its HFC to fibre. Now I don't want to imply that directly as a result of my talk to the IET, these two companies decided to change their strategy. But it's quite a coincidence. That's draw your own conclusions there. But this is what we did as a business, right? We drove change into the industry. Those decisions were largely as a result of things that we were doing in the physical world. We were rolling out these networks, competition was starting, and there had to be a response. We've grown to 4.5 million homes. BT in that time has grown to more than 21 million, and the altnets as a whole have grown to almost 20 million. And Virgin, as you know, recently paid quite a bit of money, or was about to pay quite a bit of money, for another altnet. These changes are a result of the things we did, the steps we took, how we are driving people towards fibre. Because we really believe that this is the only network that is going to be fit for the future. And that future is happening right now. Last year, we signed an agreement with Sky to use our network to deliver services. If you go to Sky's homepage now and have a look for broadband, this is the first thing that comes up. It's the top of the page, it's on the Sky website. The UK's fastest broadband speeds. Then you dig into the detail just a little bit, and on their kind of caveats page, they point out you can only do that on the CityFibre network. Right? This is from their website. We're going to dig into this. How did we get to this point where Openreach has spent £13 million, delivered 22 million homes, yet the future of broadband is being driven by the second largest ISP in the country and an alternative network, right? This is where all the action is. And we'd argue that none of this is by accident. We're almost 15 years old now, and everything that we've done has brought us to this point. We've very deliberately taken a series of decisions over those 15 years that drives this change. And I'm going to run you through a bunch of those decisions now, how they apply to the engineering of the network, and how this has resulted in the outcome we have today. Across the bottom of there, the independent ISPs, the ones that don't own their own network, are all on the CityFibre network, right? This is the network of choice if you don't own your own network. And this is working, right? We'll get to the engineering bit. I know you're all keen to do that piece, but we're going to do a little bit of corporate propaganda about how great we are for a moment. And we're really great, right? More than double the number of customers that we had in place, right? 50% revenue growth, 5 times EBITDA growth. This is a network that's working, that's operating, that's delivering services, multi-gigabit services to users. And this slide again, we presented something almost exactly like this a few years back, around our ambition for where we're going to go, covering all of these applications, right? Our vision was always not just consumers, it was businesses, it was public sector, it was mobile, it was park benches, it was bins in park benches with fire sensors, it was everything. We were going to connect everything, and we plan to do that right now. And we've had a bunch of kind of decent votes helping us from the financial side of things, right? More than £8 billion has gone into this network. Private investment driven by the change that we're making, right? 3 billion of equity directly from our partners, and backed by almost £6 billion of debt that we have available to us that we're delivering now.
Clive, can I ask that you stand closer to the microphone?
The reason that we're seeing these kind of performance metrics is because we're delivering three things, right? We're delivering better products, we're delivering better service and better economics, not prices, economics for our customers. Those three things, in order to do them, you need to have decided 5-10 years ago what the network was going to look like and how you were going to build it. That's why Sky is on our network and driving those services. That's why Vodafone is choosing us, because they get these things from us and they struggle to get them from other network providers. So let's talk a little bit about the decisions, the engineering and decisions that went into building this network. The first thing we did was, we are not a retailer. We built this network on a wholesale basis. Now that may sound like a business decision, but behind that is a whole series of technical decisions that you need to make in order to deliver services on a wholesale basis. It's not simply slap up an API somewhere and ask people to place orders. You have to think through how your network delivers services to another network and from then on to an end user, probably through a third-party contractor, and you need to be able to coordinate all of that thousands of times a day. You do not simply say, I'm going to be a wholesale network, build some access and hope it works. This is a series of deliberate decisions that deliver this service. We largely own our infrastructure as well. We'll talk a little bit about our use of PIA, but for a large part, we are not in BT exchanges. We've built a large amount of fibre ourselves. Our backhaul network is something we own. Our exchanges are something we own. Our systems are something we built and own. The reason for all that is that we needed to control the end-to-end experience. We took that decision again 8-10 years ago, and that's all playing out now in the ability for us to grow from hundreds of installs a day to where we are now, between 2,000 and 3,000 every day, like clockwork. We also took the opportunity to think about the product structure very, very differently. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of you need to put together a PowerPoint presentation, so you start pulling some slides from an old deck. You say, well, how do these fit together? And about half an hour later, what you've done is you've locked yourself into the old structure, right? You haven't thought through the messaging. You haven't kind of started from scratch. What you've done is said, how do I need to change this graph? How do these graphics fit into that whole piece, right? It's exactly the same with products in the internet space. If you start from the basis that I have a set of broadband access products and these are just extensions of the copper products, you start to think a certain way. You start from the basis at the beginning that this is fiber, that it thinks differently. You start to think about delivering different sets of services. And that's what we did. Our products look very different to the way that virtually everybody else structures them. I'll talk through that in a moment. Following on from that is the set of diagnostics that our fiber provides. This network is much more alive than a copper network, right? It's millisecond visibility of every single thing that goes on. That gives us lots of information about what's happening. That gives our ISPs lots of information about what's happening. And we took a decision to make all of that apparent to them. We're very happy for people to look at our network and say, that's broken, go and fix it, because it doesn't break very often. But it also gives them the ability to see into our network and understand what's going on for their end customers. The other thing we decided was, when we built it, ready for service means actually ready for service. Engineering decisions are promises you make to your customers. And ready for service is a serious promise. It means I can deliver this when I said I will deliver it. We do this a few thousand times a day, and we do it about 98% of the time right first time. Right? And when people turn up, the network is in place, tested, it works, they can install it. Again, deliberate decision to go much deeper into the network than other people have done. And lastly, we knew from history we weren't going to build this whole thing ourselves. So we had to understand how it was we were going to buy other networks, how we were going to integrate them into what we did, and how we're going to make this completely seamless for our wholesale customers. And that's what we've been doing for the past decade and a half. So let's talk a little bit about the wholesale decisions. The very first thing you need to decide is you cannot have a person involved at any point in the service delivery process. This all has to be run electronically, from address searches to ordering to checking dates and agreeing install dates. And on the day, work orders have to be automatic, delivered, coordinated. Not a single person can be a part of that process. From day one, the very first order that we delivered from Vodafone did not have a single person involved in the delivery of that process. Now, there were like 35 people watching that very carefully from the sides, obviously, but the systems from day one delivered zero touch, right? What does that mean when you think about the engineering of zero touch? What do you need to understand to do this? You need to know where every single piece of fiber is. You need to know that fiber is tested and workable, that it's labeled, it can be found by the engineers who need it. You need to know that how all the pieces of fiber are connected together so that you can automatically plan, this is how I'm going to connect that home with that fiber at the end over there. You need to know things like how far away the home is from your secondary node, because you need to know that engineer needs a 20-meter drop, not a 60-meter piece of fiber to blow through. You need to tie yourself into the calendaring systems and the dispatch systems of all of your service delivery partners. And you need to coordinate all of that through an API that you agreed and tested with each of your ISP customers. And you need to be able to scale that rapidly, right? Those are all engineering decisions, right? There's a product promise here, but they're driven by a set of engineering outcomes. And we're seeing this today, right? We scaled up when Sky dropped onto the network. There was a significant increase in day-to-day installation volumes. We didn't blink through that whole process, right? We've delivered exactly the same experience for Sky as for everybody else, because we started a decade ago thinking about this. The other piece is you need to be able to deliver this in a way that's economically sensible for all of your ISPs. A little bit down the road, OpenReach has a big facility out there. OpenReach is available across the entire country. Everyone is already plugged into that network. They deliver a pretty good service. Why are they buying from us? Right? You have to give them a reason. Partly that's because the service is great, but fundamentally it needs to be at a better cost. And you do that by understanding exactly how lean you need to be to build a network, right? You need to be able to deliver this stuff very, very cheaply. To be able to deliver that low-cost service through to all of your ISPs. They will give you a little bit of flexibility on the service. They will not give you any flexibility on the cost. The last 20 years has been a story of margin compression for all the ISPs, right? All of that money has kind of been pulled into the network owners. We are finally giving them the ability to make some money, right? All of that is because we engineer the services to be as low cost to deliver as possible. And then you need to think through to the end customer. One of the networks we bought a year or two ago, we went out and kind of surveyed the customers. And they said, we love this network, it's really great. A few of them said, when I got my installation, the CEO came out and met me. That made me feel really special. I was like, that's great. How many installs was the CEO going to every day? Like, how many installs were they doing? Like 3 to 5 a day, right? You can do that set of things. You can be really friendly and personal if you have no volume. If you have large amounts of volume, you need to think about what that means to the end user, right? It's not when Vodafone calls me up and says something's wrong with this order, I don't get the option to say, sounds like your problem. That's my problem, right? When the end customer's not connected, they don't pay Vodafone, they don't pay me, I don't get to buy my daughter ballet shoes. There's a very direct correlation between these things. So we've thought through, one, not only the integration with our delivery partners, but things like each of those end users gets messages on their phone, they get contacted in advance. If they want to reschedule things, I didn't know this. Before I was involved in this job, I assumed when you made an appointment with someone to come and deliver your broadband, you went home, you took the day off, and you waited for them, right? Because this is important. Like 1 in 5 people just cancel on the day. It's crazy, right? If you don't give them as many options as possible to manage that process, you just get a whole bunch of inefficiency through the piece. So we know where the installers are. We tell you when they're going to turn up in an hour. You can text us on the day and say, here's some issues. You know, I need to drop my kids at school. Here's a window I'm not out. And we can manage all of that. We do that because it makes life easier for our ISPs, and when our ISPs are happy, then we're happy. And then lastly, we spoke a little bit about diagnostics, and we'll jump into this in a little bit again. But it's when things go wrong that people really care about what you do, right? When I do 2,000 installs and 1,997 of them go really well, do you know who calls me? The other 3 people. And it's really important to them, right? They call their ISP and say, what happened? This person said they were going to be here at 2, they didn't turn up, right? When something breaks, what you don't want to hear on the other end of the phone is, I'm going to call the network provider and figure out what's going on, we'll get back to you, right? You need to be able to answer that in the moment. We did some research, basically, when we started getting all these 5-star reviews on Trustpilot. We asked ourselves, why do people like the service? Why do they score us, 5 stars out of 5? And I was shocked at the number of people who said things like, you know what, you said you were going to turn up between 12 and 1, and then you did. That was enough for a 5-star review from like thousands of people. Just deliver on the promise of when you're going to be here, right? Those end customers have had a terrible time over the last 20 years. They've been treated very badly at an arm's length. The integrated service providers are out there, in some senses deliberately felt they didn't need to do that because you had nowhere else to go if you wanted a 200 meg product from somebody. OpenReach did really well, but again, separated, they had a relationship with the ISPs dealt with the customers. That's one relationship. You need to think about that going through. The second piece about all this is we own almost everything that we need to operate and run this network. On the left, this is our backhaul network, right? About 80% of that is fiber that we directly own across the UK. Some of it is leased from third parties to connect things. But this is all of our fiber exchanges interlinked in rings, big resilient rings, massive 400 gig capacity across all of this. So we can manage the network, we can deliver traffic to anybody. If you're a new ISP on our network, the fastest we have interconnected you and delivered you service across this entire network is about 4 weeks. From signing the contract to first customer, right? We can only do that because we own all this stuff. We are not BT exchanges. That's not 100% true. We've bought some networks that are in exchanges. We do have some small number of exchanges where we have equipment. We have a legacy business that we bought that delivers Ethernet. So it's not 100% true, but to a large extent, I deliver all these services from my own fiber exchanges. I'll show you some pictures of those in a moment. But what they do for us is they deliver scale to our ISPs. Sky is currently interconnected to thousands of BT exchanges. They're interconnected at 140 points on our network. Every one of those points delivers 30 to 60,000 homes. They have scale. They don't need to connect hundreds of places. We buy new networks, we bring them back to fixes, and we say to all of our ISPs, by the way, there's another 200,000 homes that are just available to you. We make it simple for them. All right. We allow them to sit in those fiber exchanges. If they want to host things, we'll take fiber out to them. But we own our destiny in this process. These are modern buildings, air conditioning, redundant power, all kinds of good stuff. We have this nationwide fiber backbone. If you want, we will deliver traffic from anywhere in the country to anywhere else in the country. You want to run your ISP out of Hull, we can do that. And you can land a customer in Plymouth on Hull, and I can do that at any point in time, fairly cheaply because I own the network. The other piece we did was, we do use PIA. We do use the poles, we do use some third-party infrastructure to deliver within cities. But the first step from the fixes is a set of very deeply buried, very high-capacity fiber rings. We run a ring, east and west, north and south, and I'm not an engineer. We can pick either of those two things. That's the first part of what we do. We own that fiber. There's a lot of fiber in there. They're typically 2 to 3 kind of serious ducts. We're able to deliver not only all the consumer traffic, but dark fiber for any other service that goes on there. Similarly, we built all of our OSS stack from scratch. Now, I probably wouldn't do this today. Today, there are lots of mature stacks that think about wholesale services really well. But when I started doing this in 2014, you couldn't buy a wholesale fiber OSS from anybody. Right? We had to go and build this ourselves. It not only gave us a bunch of really useful things like vendor independence and so forth, but it also meant that when ISPs land on the network, we're able to integrate them really, really rapidly. We're able to give them a full experience of what it's like to deliver services over our network end to end within weeks, basically, which simulates the whole network. We have a whole separate OSS implementation. And if you're an ISP, you can turn up, we can test all of your CPE, we can deliver an end-to-end kind of model office, and we can do that constantly. Right? This is a huge advantage for us. Sky went from signing a contract to live in 7 months. Nationwide access, 4.5 million homes, selling multi-gigabit services in 7 months. I think that's pretty good. And lastly, we spent a lot of time on work management. We took an existing work management system and we just customized the absolute end of the whole thing. That thing coordinates a few thousand employees driving around. It means that we can do things like you can change your appointment up to like late the night before. We can reconfigure that stuff. It means that in theory, if you order by 10 o'clock in the morning, we can deliver a service that afternoon to you. Our work management system is faster than our ISPs can deliver CPE to their customers. Right? So we're ahead of them. We're encouraging them to think about delivering stuff on a more rapid basis. These are our fixes. Key thing for those of you in the audience who get this reference, there are no parquet floors in any of these. They're custom built in Ireland. They're containers. They hold about 13 racks, and they're modular, so we can put 2 or 3 on a site. We drive them over in a truck. We pour a base. We drop them in. It takes like 21 days to install one of these things. 60, 70,000 homes, a few thousand businesses, typically a bunch of public sector networks. Mobile connectivity runs through these. They're built out of steel. They're very difficult to break into. They have fire suppression. They have all the good stuff. They're data centers, right? And as a result of this, all of the uptime and all the rest of it is completely guaranteed. The fixes are a real kind of secret weapon that we have. The ISPs put equipment within the fixes themselves to interconnect to us. That means we can bring fiber in. It also means that we can bring ungodly amounts of fiber into these things. There are tens of thousands of fiber pairs flowing into these fixes, right? We can deliver dark fiber to virtually anywhere in the city. And we have 24/7 access. This is great, right? And then let's talk a little bit about kind of the actual core engineering that we have within the process. Fiber networks are shockingly simple, right? The beauty of them is they run for very long distances, but they are very, very simple to put together, as long as you can keep track of the accounting. So we have our fixes. We have big fiber rings that run around that, and that's what drops into what we call primary node. That primary node is where the first split happens. If you're familiar with ponds, that's a 1-to-4 or 1-to-8 split, depending on how dense we want to be. And those primary nodes are also fixed configuration. So we build them, we bury them, and no one touches them again for quite some time, right? If we need to augment, we need to go into them. No engineers on a day-to-day basis touch those primary nodes. They're really, really critical. From those primary nodes, we then take some fiber out. Sometimes that's PIA, quite often it's own built fiber, sometimes it's overhead. And we land at the secondary node where there is a secondary split. Again, a 1-to-8 split. That gives us either 1-to-32 or 1-to-64 delivery. And then we take that all the way to the edge of the customer's home. This is what RFS means for us. when you walk out of your house, you could go kick some dirt aside and see a little CityFibre Toby box, or we'll be on a pole right nearby. That's the key important part, is bringing ourselves really, really close to the customer. And then every part of this is understood in the systems that we have, in the fibre tracking and capacity. All of this is transparently managed through IT. So people, to a large extent, should not be touching any of this stuff. In terms of how this is delivered on the day, this is where kind of the rubber hits the road. This is where those promises you made, this is where those contracts you signed, and more importantly, this is where those service level guarantee payments happen, right? This is what it all leads to. We spent billions of pounds putting the fibre in, we signed contracts, we agreed things, we built these fixes, but on the day, somebody has to turn up when they said they were going to turn up and connect your house. Now, it's okay to fail a little bit. It's not great. I worked out recently, I got this wrong when I did this last time publicly, so I've got castigated by our CEO. But when we're sort of 96, 98% right first time, at 2,000 installs a day, you're disappointing 30 to 40 people a day, right? And that's not great. 30 to 40 people over the course of a month, you're getting up to like 1,000 people that don't get service in the day that you said that you wanted to. And a lot of those people sort of go, okay, well, I won't take service from you, right? I'm going to keep my money and give it to somebody else. We don't like that. 1,000 people, it's really valuable stuff to us. So on the day installation is a critical process for us, right? And we've spent a lot of time making sure this runs perfectly. How this works on the day is either you're going to be delivered by an overhead network, so there's a node near you on a pole, and somebody has to come out, put a piece of fibre and hang it, connect it to your house. Sometimes that's with a sort of a lifter like that. Often they just climb the pole and they connect the final drop to the outside of your house, drill a hole through the wall. Wife complains about the mess. We go inside and clean up all the mess. We're very nice about that stuff. Similarly, if you're coming underground, we come up to the Toby box, we dig a hole through your garden, we avoid all the roses, we lift up your block drive, and we end up connecting to that wall box on the outside. We go through the wall and we connect some stuff. What happens after that is somebody goes and blows some fibre. Right, so the secondary node is where you need to be plugged in. These are all labeled. Your work order is turned up on your iPad and it says, this is going to go onto this port on this patching panel. You need a 55-meter blown fibre that you should have with you. You go blow that fibre through, and it pops up there and indicates you plug it in here. And then once you go inside the home, you plug in these tiny little ONTs. This is a XGS ONT that we've got up there, 10 gigs. Scan the QR code in the box, and in the background, all the systems coordinate to say, okay, I know this is order number 800. You've just plugged in box number 763. I should be seeing that on this port on the OLT. I can see that. And in about 5 or 6 minutes, the OLT service comes up, the light turns green, and everything works. Typically, our part of the installation in the home happens in single-digit minutes, and then we plug in CPE equipment, and that can sometimes take a while to turn on. There's a TR69 process that goes on. Sometimes there's some upgrades, but we stand around with the end user, and we'll show them it working. Right? By the time we leave, you've seen it work. You've got your television working. You're watching Disney Plus, and you're happy. We don't do very much with the Wi-Fi, though we're thinking about helping all that stuff. All of that, 3,000 times a day, 6 days a week, 98% of the time we get that right. That's the promise that we made. It's a promise you have to keep. The promise is backed up by software, engineering, 10 years of thinking. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what those products are that we deliver. These are the two things we do. Over here are the products that we sell, right? And how we compare to the others. On this side is download speed. Everyone understands download speed. We're at 5.5 gigs. That's the fastest product we deliver at the moment. We are thinking about how we take that further. On this side is upload speed. You'll notice a bit of a difference between the way we approach that and the way everybody else approaches that. One of the things we decided with our products was not only were they simple, but we were going to deliver the full capacity of the network in both directions to our ISPs, right? Everybody understands that the difference between a 40 meg and an 80 meg ADSL, VDSL line is nothing, right? It's just a choice. It's a software setting, right? And that's really frustrating. So we deliver the full capacity in both directions. That is becoming increasingly important for our customers. The other thing we do is I only have 3 prices. The price for a product that runs up to 160 megs, really useful for sort of social type credit stuff if you're trying to do IoT, other bits and pieces. The price up to a gigabit, and this is actually a gigabit delivered to the end user. This product actually runs at about 1200 megabits in both directions. The price for something that runs in multi-gig. Three prices. You go to the website, you go to the Sky website, that's not what they see. They see a whole series of other speeds in between. That's their choice. We let them do that. But what it does is it enables the ISPs to use speed to protect their customer. You call up, you're trying to renew your contract. They know they can take you from 500 megs to 800 megs. It doesn't cost them anything. It doesn't cost me anything either, right? This capacity exists. Network capacity evaporates the second after it's not used, right? So this doesn't cost me anything, and it gives a powerful tool to our ISPs to retain customers. The other piece is we deliver all of this on a basis that you can deliver that multi-gig service. So yes, if you're going from a gig to 5 gigs, that's going to cost you a bit more, but you don't have to visit the customer. Again, little software switch, we just flip you over and take you up. And we do all of that at somewhere around 25 to 40% less than what OpenReach charges. Right? That's our prices today. That's the advantage our ISPs have. We spoke a little bit about the best service at the end of there. This is all tied up in the economics piece, right? These prices sound great, and they really are great, but they can be blown up in a heartbeat if the service breaks and the customer calls you. It costs tens of pounds for someone just to pick the phone up and say, what's going on? There's a fault. We need to figure something out, right? It doesn't matter if you're saving a few pounds in a month. If the fault rate is bad, if you're unable to help customers, your costs to serve are going to shoot right up, and you care a lot less about your rental prices, right? Support people are expensive. You need to have as few of them as possible, and that means you need to have a network that works well. You also have to have a network that you can diagnose and fix rapidly. And the other thing we did was, as we think about the future, is this multi-gig process. I'm going to talk a little bit about why that's important. I know in the past, we've often heard things like, does anyone really need a gigabit? Well, yeah, they do. Right. Do they need a gigabit 24/7? No. But at certain points in time, a gigabit, 2 gigs, 5 gigs is really important. Right. This is not about average throughput. We can make all of those network arguments about how much data people use. They're very consistent. An XGS user on 5 gigs uses 20 or 30% more overall throughput than a user on 160 megs. But they use it in a way that's very narrow, right? For those 5 minutes they're using it, it's important. And that's why in 2025, we upgraded our entire network from GPON to XGS. 55,000 ports, 277 OLTs across 114 fiber exchanges. We did this, we started the whole process, but we accelerated the whole thing very rapidly. I think it took about 9 months to upgrade the entire thing to XGS. The entire network today is 10 gig capable. The reason for this is fairly straightforward. We started building this stuff a long time ago. We said 2017, our first fiber access networks were actually 2014 in York, right? We had a supplier called ECI that people are probably familiar with. No longer a supplier of our stuff over here. But back then, GPON made a lot of sense, right? The cycles for these things are about 7 to 8 years long. So in 2017, when we started deploying this network in anger, GPON was absolutely the right choice. When we got to 2024, and our customers were asking us about how do I have that fastest speed piece, we knew that we had to upgrade to XGS, and we did that, right? 55,000 PON ports upgraded in 9 months. And now we have services that run multi-gigs, multi-directional, and you can credibly claim to have the fastest broadband in the UK. Let's speak a little bit about why that's important. And again, this is about experience, like in the instant. This is not about how much data did you download over the month. People on the fastest speeds don't use that much more data than anybody else, but they get it really quickly. When you think about web browsing, I know we don't do that much of that anymore, but a 30 meg page takes a second at 240 megs, right? It's sub-seconds at gigabits. This is about feel. It's about interactivity. If you dig about some years ago, Amazon did a study on how much money they lost if they had an extra 100 milliseconds of page rendering delay. And it was like £1 billion, right? Every 100 milliseconds they took off was just a multiplier in terms of how much more they sold. Those pages, those web pages, those basic things that are getting larger and larger is the other thing, right? I know with streaming video, you don't suck the whole thing down all at once. But there is caching, there is some things that go on, and there's a substantial difference in the amount of data you move over a 100 meg service versus a gigabit service, right? You can suck down an UHD film in 30 seconds, right? And the really big one, this is where this is actually real today, that is the size of the upgrade that you need to download on your PlayStation 5, your Xbox, to get Modern Warfare updated. 175 gigs of data. I experienced this. I own a PS5, which I've never used, because I have a 14-year-old daughter, and she owns that, really. She doesn't use it that often, but every so often she'll kind of boot it up and try and download an update. And it takes so long that the PS5 turns itself off. You have to keep going back and fiddling with the little buttons to make sure it stays on, right? 175 gigs, that's 13 minutes at 2 gig service, right? This is a real thing that happens today. Gamers download hundreds of gigabytes of data. I don't know if you can read this incredibly tiny text, but there's someone literally here saying, I can't play this game, I have a data cap on my broadband. I can't download this update. I can't use my PlayStation. And then the other stuff is, future stuff. We are starting to see a lot less VR, I think, than all of us thought. But AR is now really starting to happen. Right? And then, of course, harking back to COVID, working from home. Right? 2021. You're on a Teams call, you're on a Zoom call, and one of your colleagues was pixelated and not quite working. We all knew what network that colleague was on. We all understood where the upstream cap was like locking them out of that conversation, right? You just have to take that away now. Everybody works from home 2 or 3 days a week. Upload is the new download, right? Security cameras, we were away this weekend. We kept track of the house from Cornwall. People are file sharing, collaborating. All of the stuff is really critical. Upload is much more important than it used to be. It's still not balanced perfectly, but people need this today, right? And we are thinking about not just what do I need to support today, because if you said to me, the biggest issue is a 200 gig download for Call of Duty, I think you could sort of say, well, that's a kind of an exceptional piece. But all of this is just getting faster all the time. George, when he was at OpenReach, used to talk about the physics of the garden shed. And what he meant was, if you go in a garden shed, your garden shed is full. Doesn't matter how big the shed is. You buy a bigger shed, don't worry, that shed's already full. Another shed, that shed's full, right? The shed is always full. The network is always full. We upgraded some network mobile backhaul connections in Hull about 8-10 years back. They were previously run over microwave. It was very difficult to buy backhaul from Kingston. We built some dark fiber and we connected a bunch of mobile backhaul sites. On the day that we turned that backhaul on, traffic in Hull on those links jumped 310%. For the past years, every mobile phone user in Hull had been limited. They'd been able to transfer a quarter of as much data as they actually wanted to, right? We talk about, do you need multi-gigabits? Absolutely. And you're going to need more of it. And if I give it to you, you're going to fill it up. And it happens really quickly. See, this is the IET, so we have to have one network traffic graph in this process. This is how we think about how to deliver across an XGS network a peak information rate of, say, at least 5 gigabits, given the traffic patterns that we know people have, right? If you're on a 5 gig service, you want to speed test it, do you get 5 gigs, given everybody else is using some stuff? Every year, the network gets about 20% fuller. Slowed down a bit, used to be 24%, but we see a sort of 20% cadence. That means that from 2029, so over here, where big 128-way split networks start to fail. If you take that up to this point over here, you double the amount of capacity in the network, it's consumed in 2.5 years, right? This is just extrapolating existing end user traffic, right? People are transferring ungodly amounts of information at peak. At 2 o'clock in the morning, the network's empty. But come 6:30, everybody turns on Netflix. Every kid in the house turns on an iPad, and all the stuff streams down. And all of that's in HD now, right? You have to think about the capacity of the network. You have to think about the capacity to deliver peak information rates. People want to speed test their service. They paid for 5 gigs. They want to know they're getting it, right? And you need to engineer the network to deliver that. And then the last piece is we're running at probably a few minutes late, so we'll run through this. But I wanted to talk a little bit about diagnostics. The visibility you get through these networks is amazing, right? Every ONT chats back to the OLT like every tens of milliseconds. When something gets turned off, you know about it faster than the blink of an eye. And you see all kinds of really cool things. When we started out this process, we got up to a few tens of thousands of customers, and we started to notice a pattern. Our network didn't work very well after about 10 o'clock for some reason. Like 2 to 3% of the network fell off. It just failed. And we were like, what's going on? I didn't know this, but 2 to 4% of people turn off their ONTs at night when they go to sleep. It's not something I would ever have thought would happen, right? But reliably, we could see these set of ONTs about 10:30 got turned off, and then the next morning at 7:30 got turned back on. And we were able to sort of say, okay, well, I can ignore those. That's not downtime, right? That's somebody who's turned it off. We could see the dying gas, but we could track all that stuff through. We started to see power failures in streets. Peterborough, horrible power, terrible. You could see a street collapsed, right? What I see is 30 subscribers on the street all failing at the same time. What Sky sees is 3 subscribers, and Vodafone sees 3 subscribers. And Zen sees 1 subscriber. They do not have a vision of the street. We do, right? I'll tell you about that. And when you call Zen, when you call Vodafone, the person at the other end is like, I know, you've lost power. It's fine, right? We need to expose to those ISPs all of the bits and pieces within our network that you can, so that they can serve their customers better. And we are super transparent about this stuff, right? We give you APIs, we let you query, you can run CFM to test throughput on the whole piece. Because if your customer's unhappy, then you're unhappy, then I'm unhappy because I don't get paid. Diagnostics, you need to think about this from a fiber network point of view, not from a broadband point of view. Fiber networks are fundamentally different. They deliver much, much more information. They give you a much richer conversation about what is going on, and they allow you to actually understand the dynamics of what's going on in your network. And the last piece is, for us, as I said earlier, ready for service means really ready for service. It means there's tested fiber outside the location. We have visual tests, we have automated tests. Amusing story about this, we had a whole series of failures at one point, and we had a look at the optical tests, and they were all like 100%. We're like, this is very weird. And then at some point, we ran all that stuff through an AI, and it said, sorry, if you only give me one image. It was the same photograph. It was the same optical test we were getting back from a contractor for every installation. So that contractor's no longer with us. And we went back and tested all that stuff again, right? But yeah, everything out here, we test right up to the edge. So it has to be really on the day. And I want to just talk a little bit about the environment that we swim in, right? We've had a few pieces of M&A that we've completed. We're very happy with those. We plugged those networks in about 7 months. Everyone's transacting on them. One of those is in Hull. We estimate that on an average month, if you're trying to buy a broadband service in Hull, 97% of you will buy one from me. People really do not like Kingston Telecom. But our network is not that big compared to Openreach. Openreach is a little bit above 21 million now. We're coming up to 5 million. That's not the whole story. The altnets, and these are unique premises, right? We've deduped these. This is where the number of homes that the altnet universe can touch is heading up to about 18 million, right? Squint a bit, maybe tilt your head on the side. You can see these two graphs are basically the same size, right? And the altnets are doing pretty well. This isn't a comprehensive list of them or anything like that, right? This is sort of a sample of very large altnets, what we call sort of mid-size, below 1 million, and kind of smaller altnets. The size of their footprints. And the little dots are take-up, right? A lot of these altnets are in that sort of 10 to 20, 25% take-up space. You hear a lot of noise about how badly the industry is doing. No one can survive with 15% take-up. That's not good. But it's a lot better than you think, right? There's a bunch of people out there with 200,000 or 300,000 homes and 30, 50,000 customers, right? This universe is big. We intend to kind of work our way through this list and pick up a number of these entities. We intend to be at 8 to 10 to 12 million homes, delivering all of that thought, the last 15 years of concentration across the whole country. There we are. We think what we do is we maintain sustainable competition. What's brought us to this point is competitive networks, right? This all got shaken up 2018, 2020. Everyone switched to fiber. It was because competition existed. Someone will win that competition. Someone will come second. Someone will probably not come third, right? But it's all because competition exists, and we need to maintain that competition. That's what's driving the prices down. That's what's driving end user satisfaction up. That's what's delivering value to the country. So we've done this for 15 years. What are we doing next? We are going to get bigger. We're going to keep driving take-up. I think we're above 900,000 customers now on the network. We'll hit 1 million fairly soon. Well above, I think we're at about 22%. We're filling the network up at about 1.5% a month. All right. And we will always lead the market. Kind of the current flavor of the month, that's great. We're thinking about next generation stuff already. We're trying to think about where that goes. So, sorry, George, I managed to run on slightly.
Can I ask that we... So, I'd like to take questions from the floor here and then alternate them with questions from the webinar, which Ian will deal with. First off, to the webinar folks, sincere apologies for failing to sort the audio out for the first few minutes. And hopefully that hasn't marred your experience of the event too much. The fact that so many of you still on there suggests that it's not too bad. So can I ask for a question from the webinar first, just to show that we care about them. Okay, well in that case I'll take one from the audience while the webinar folks. First off, this gentleman.
Thanks, a really interesting talk. A question about PIA. So the little town I live in near here, CityFibre, just spent a lot of time and money digging the road up, and I wondered why you were doing that rather than using PIA? Is it just about the economics, or is it that PIA doesn't do what we want, or we don't have control, or?
No, we use PIA as often as we can, right? So the reason we'd have done that is either the ducts are full over there, or there's some other reason. Perhaps there are no ducts in some cases. PIA is not available everywhere in the country, probably 70% of the locations, maybe a bit more. But there will be places where we need to dig. We may also have been digging kind of rings around you where you were as well.
Yeah, so if you can, you'll use it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Any from the webinar yet? I'd like to encourage the folks on the webinar, please ask some questions. We do care that we provide a good service to you as well. So, Gavin.
Thanks, Clayton. Very interesting talk. A lot of us think about fibre for broadband as consumers, but you mentioned the business use case in mobile backhaul. What sort of traction are you getting there, and what are the sort of product differences that your customers are looking for in those business-centric or mobile backhaul fibre products?
I mean, the mobile backhaul piece is dominated by macro backhaul and largely kind of dark fibre services at this stage, right? The mobile companies are trying to decouple bandwidth from cost. So they'd like to go, I don't know how much traffic I'm going to need in 15 years, but I don't want to pay any more than I have now. So mostly what we deliver is dark fibre from a mast back to an exchange, and they can then run that in the way that they want. On the business side of things, it's more complicated. I've spent quite some time trying to drive people onto these shared PON networks. I think they're better than Ethernet. They run faster, they have lower latency, they are encrypted, unlike Ethernet, by natively, and you can turn the bandwidth up and down really easily, and they're cheaper to run. But a number of people still insist on buying point-to-point fibre from us, and we take their money. So the network is, the market is still split fundamentally into people who want traditional EAD-like looking services, a box with a piece of fibre that they own at the end, and then what we call the sort of business FTTP market, where we're driving the same set of things, right? A consumer service, but we'll fix that in a few hours. I think my prediction is that's the service that wins everywhere. A great service. You can get gigabits, you can run large buildings off the back of that, and we'll fix it as faster than Ethernet service. So I don't understand why you'd still be buying Ethernet.
Can I make a plea for the webinar? We'd love to get some questions from you. Ian will relay them to Clayton immediately. Any more questions?
Pop culture questions, things about the Grammys, and anything really.
Okay, David, and then I'll move to the back.
Why stop at 30%?
30% was always kind of the short-term round number, to be honest. We have no end number in mind, right? We will grow to as large as we can where it's economically rational, right? So we will continue to buy.
Is that some kind of economic break point, or you don't know?
No, we do know. At about 30%, a lot of this stuff gets much more efficient from our point of view. You can amortize the fixed costs and the system costs over a wider range, and that's a sensible place to land. If you get to 30%, you're probably okay. But every additional home, is valuable to us. So 10, 12, 15 million, we'll go as far as we can.
Yeah. No.
That makes you wonder whether we.
I suppose this happened after you started creating the tool, but what do you think about the VMO2 and NextFibre attempted acquisition of Netomnia? Netomnia looked like a lovely, nicely fitting jigsaw piece.
It did, yes. If you had a look at their Pangea kind of continents fitting together, they were very complementary. Look, I don't want to say too much, but we've been very clear. We think that's a fairly anti-competitive move from our point of view. There used to be 3 networks there, now there are going to be 2. And the VMO2 already has fibre or HFC in about 77% of that footprint. We don't understand the economics of that whole thing. We don't understand what their thinking is, and they pay quite a penny for that. So we've said we think the CMA should look into that. We're pretty sure they will. So we'll see how that plays out. Good question.
Yeah, okay. I'm one of the altnets, truly. I've had that for 2 years. Now, they've come in through the BT network, and they've come under my grass on the old BT line. If I chose one of your ISPs, are you going to come in on that same line, or are you going to be running a new line into me?
It all depends. Like,
Right.
if we can use the BT services, and truly, we don't overlap with Truly largely, so unfortunately, I can't serve your home.
No.
But if we did, we'd probably try to use the same access infrastructure.
But it's FTTP, so logically you could come in on the same line.
In theory, yeah, but we'd run another fibre in. We wouldn't
right,
use
okay.
fibre, yeah.
Fine.
They own that bit of fibre, not
Right.
us.
There is a question.
Where?
There we go. There's a question.
Oh, I can't see it.
I can see it a second ago.
Sorry, there was somebody else with their hand up. No.
Are you significantly replacing HFC networks? Are they moving over to your network?
Yes. Yeah, quite substantially. It's not just us. If you speak to any of the altnets, they have the same phenomenon, right? The HFC network is not competitive with fibre. Virgin's ARPUs are up in the sort of 45s or something like that. The more expensive ISPs on our networks are a gig at £30. You get plenty of stuff with a price that starts at £2. We're pretty confident that I don't need to worry about HFC competition.
I have a question from Sarah online,
Oh yeah.
and it's one which is not quite on your patch. She thanks you for an interesting talk. Can you comment on the progress of the digitalisation of landlines across the UK and how that sits with your efforts?
Yeah, look, it does intercept what we're doing, right? Because that's all part of the copper shutdown program that's ultimately going to drive everybody from copper onto some form of fibre. And we're super interested in seeing that happen, not just for voice, but for broadband and everything else, because we think once you have to leave your copper network, you're going to make a choice, and we're a really great choice. We like that process. We'd like that to be competitive. You know, we don't think that it should be an automatic swap onto your existing network provider. But certainly the migration from copper voice to digital voice should be happening a bit faster. Other countries have done this, reaped quite a few benefits through the process. I think our POTS network was, a pretty amazing innovation. Strowger, we were talking about earlier, George, and System X, like incredible engineering, unbelievable stuff, now utterly useless, right? Digital voice, high quality digital voice is something that all of our ISPs have access to, and they choose to deliver voice over broadband. We can make that happen. It sounds better than your copper line. I think that should be happening faster.
Still none from online, but
Question from you.
Okay. I was interested in your list of all the different providers, and I look out my window and I see already now 3 fibre providers. Where do you think this is going in your 5-year, 10-year? Can't keep. I don't believe. I know how much it costs through history. Where do you think this goes? Where is it going to be? End up 3 people only, and everywhere else will either be merged or disappear? Or you can't keep having people building more.
No, and I think the overbuild thing is now starting to slow down quite a bit. Openreach is certainly kind of overbuilding other people. I don't think that's Openreach trying to overbuild people. Openreach is just rolling its network out, and overbuild is happening as a result. But I think we track probably 2 or 3 types of outcomes here. Either this ends up as 2 networks of some description, probably kind of unlikely. More likely we end up with kind of 2 dominant networks and a weaker third network providing some competition. But there's also a world where you have almost sort of franchise type blobs. So you end up with kind of one network and then 5 or 6 regional blobs of networks, like a London provider that is quite dominant and doesn't merge with everybody else. We do think that having all of those in one network is much more efficient, though, right? Ultimately, you need to run this network with a few hundred people, and running a 5 million home network versus a 10 million home network, you don't need that many more people. So the logic of combination of a combination will drive that stuff eventually. But yeah, we've said that for quite some time now. We're still waiting for it to happen. Perhaps the Virgin thing is the first step.
Just one technical question, and if you don't know, because I know you're not the engineering person, what made you go to London when most of the world's gone fixed?
Largely that when we built stuff out in York, we had fixed fibre which we left in the Toby boxes, and when we turned up a few months later, it was destroyed. Right. It was dirty. It was, and what we felt was that operationally, just leaving spare fibre at that point, which is fairly easily accessible with a screwdriver or something like that, just didn't give us the quality we needed. So we wanted to kind of have fresh fibre, blow it through, be able to test it on the day. It's that deliver on the day thing. And just too many times we turn up and you couldn't use the fibre that was there and it had to be pulled out and replaced.
Okay,
We have
Ian,
one.
you've got some.
We have one from online, and it's from Bun Chan, who asks: can Sky Fibre offer guaranteed bandwidth, point-to-point grade service within a normal price? I think it's what he's asking. But
can that look like an Ethernet circuit? Look, there are some guarantees.
yeah, but I think that's what he's referring to. It's point-to-point. So
they have access to our business grade fibre and our business grade products, which do exactly that. But I'd also note that the consumer grade products, we do guarantee a level of performance from all of that, right? It's not, if you buy a 2 gig service, we don't guarantee 2 gigs, but there are minimums, and there are in the hundreds of megs. It's not a free for all kind of network.
right. Can I ask one of my own?
Go on.
So the little Toby box in the drive. So you've got a tube coming into that.
Yes.
But do you then provide a tube from there? Engineer turns up.
We do, yes.
The technician turns up.
That's the job of the
And
technician.
then you blow the fibre all the way through from that ONT to
We do, yeah.
box. Oh, okay.
Well, it's blown from the other side because it's connectorized at the secondary node, but we blow it into the house, yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Question now.
Yeah, I've got a CityFibre box right at the end of my front garden. Been there about a couple of years now.
You should totally take service. It's great.
Yeah, but I thought that as well, and I hadn't realised at the time you're only doing wholesale. And I've had one retailer called Cookin
Right.
put a card through the door, but nothing.
Which city are you in?
It's in Ipswich.
Okay.
Well, halfway between here and Mottlesham, so housing estate with no overhead cables. It's all underground.
Yeah, look, it is up to the ISPs to market. And Ipswich was one of the cities we built quite early in the process, and I suspect that some of them think that they've marketed to you, and perhaps that isn't going to happen again. A lot of this marketing has switched from direct cards through the door or post and so forth, or door knocking, to all online. So it may just be that you're kind of missing that. If you go and search on our website with your postcode, it'll tell you exactly who's available at that point.
Yeah, I know. I put the postcode in, and OpenReach come back and say sometime at the beginning of 2027.
Well, if you put it into our website, it says something sooner.
Marshall, I think you're
Yeah, you're getting bigger, faster. That's the message I'm getting. No limits, to what the demand will be. And good to see that the price is cheaper. Yeah, but do you have any figures for the uptake of the service, of your service, from all the premises you have nationwide? And what's a very difficult question to answer.
Sure. No, we published results back in up to the end of December.
Right.
At the end of December, across the footprint, we'd had 848,000 customers, which is about 20% take up.
20%.
And we, subsequently, that's moved on now. I checked the numbers earlier this week. That number starts with a 9 now. So yeah, take up it's not quite where we want it to be, but it's proceeding rapidly.
Okay. And obviously, that's economically, that's still a sound proposition at that level.
Oh yeah, very much.
Ian, you've got a question online.
We've got an online question from Phil. How do you weigh up when to connect new cities, towns and villages?
Well, we're building significantly less now, and we're mostly going to do the rest of it through M&A. As you said, the question earlier about kind of overbuild, there's no point in us going to overbuild other cities that are already built. In addition to which, we peaked out at about 1 million homes a year. That's just too slow. Right. So we're going to go and buy a bunch of networks, and that's how we're going to end up presumably in Phil's city over there at some point. Back in the day, I did run the process to select cities, though. And we had a fairly complex model that sort of looked at density and cost to build and propensity to take up and so forth. And once you ran that, it basically said, these are all the cities, and it looked exactly like all the cities that Virgin built out to, looked like all the cities Openreach is running to. Everyone runs the same models, and everyone ends up in the same set of locations, because the cheap places are all obvious. So.
More questions? Steve?
So just picking up on Marshall's point about the economics. So I am a CityFibre customer with Tube, so they did the mail shot amongst a number. I'm just curious because on the day that the installation happened, which happened exactly as you described, it was really clean,
great,
very well done. But there was 4 guys turned up and they were there for 3 hours. I'm just curious about what I'm paying on the retail price versus what the cost of installation is versus whether or not I might stay or might not stay in 18 months when the contract ends. How does that work for you?
Look, I think all of us would like to get that price down, and 4 people for 3 hours is probably too many. I'm assuming there was some specific reason. Normally that's not 4 people for 3 hours. It's a much quicker process.
I can't comment on that.
Yeah. But look, we're trying to drive that price down as much as we can, right? That is currently the single largest cost that we have, is connecting customers. We're going to connect another few million. Every pound that we take off is worth a few £1 million in our back pocket. So.
We have a question from Dave, sorry, and then Nick.
I talked to people working in NBN in Australia, which is a bit similar to yourself, and they're very focused on reducing truck rolls and repair costs. So I'd be interested in what your experiences are as the network's growing, about targets for repair, the cost of sending trucks, isolating faults. I'd be interested if you've got any stories or experiences around areas which are of considerable concern to you.
I think the primary issue that we've got is probably the earlier networks that we built. The last 3 or 4 million, we had the quality kind of thing sorted out. Probably the first million, we were going a bit fast, and some of those networks were slightly less well put together, right? So we spent some time kind of going back and trying to predict where there are issues. Faults, once the network is up, are not of a particular concern, if I'm honest. Most of our complaints are things like, I think my broadband's too slow. And when we check it, it's inevitably the Wi-Fi or something else.
Are you seeing on PON power breaks that are affecting parts of the PON network? Because that seems to be something that's quite prevalent in Australia, because they're generally serving much larger areas, and the cost of sending trucks is a lot higher than it would be here just because of physical distances. Just wonder if you've seen that interaction with power networks.
No, aside from Peterborough, as I said, most of the power networks are pretty stable, so we don't see a lot of that. We do see occasional kind of flapping on particular endpoints, and that's usually because someone's fat-fingered a installation and kind of cracked a fibre or something like that. The NBN guys we're good friends with them. We see them every year, and they have slightly different challenges than us.
Nick?
Yes, Craig, no, just interested to know whether you have any particular thoughts about serving MDUs and some of the challenges involved there.
Yeah. They're complicated, right? Mostly because there's no process. We're getting a lot better at this than we used to be. But the key thing is just the way you to get into the building, right? Once you're able to go in and they trust you to do that stuff, it's all very straightforward. And the MDU experience is much better than the other experience, right? Because typically there's fibre inside, it's on your floor, and someone just has to kind of connect the riser to your apartment. They don't get their boots dirty. It's really quite good. But getting into the building is difficult, and those buildings change all the time. My building, I live in London, and I'm a hyper optic customer. And we redecorated the building a few years back, and a few months later there was a hyper optic guy in the kind of vestibule looking around. And I walked out one morning and I went, all of your copper is behind that new wall, mate. And he left quite disappointed. So look, there are real challenges. The management of that stuff. The government's doing some work on trying to make that easier, but that's still a thing that I think we need to solve.
Is that an industry challenge, do you think, that we need an industry code of practice around that?
It would be better if there was some kind of general approach. But I do think that, again, competition is fixing this, right? Like Hyperoptic figured this out for the most part. So it is possible to do really well. You don't need a bunch of intervention to get it right. You just need to concentrate on it.
I think it's a kind of related question actually from Lewis, who asks, how does the speed keep up with increasing connections? I started noticing slower connections, I guess he means speed, after 2 years, but not your network. Anticipate any reduction in speed because you're actually increasing the number of customers?
So first of all, I should describe how our network gets connected. We fill up every PON, right? So when new customers come on, they don't join your PON. So I fill up the PON port, and then I fill up the next one. So where you're going to see reductions in speed is because people are pushing more traffic through, not because more people are on your bit of the network. There are two ways that you see poor performance. One, the ISP's backhaul isn't upgraded enough. We keep in contact with our ISPs. We monitor kind of the interfaces between them, and we can see when that's starting to happen. Some ISPs are better at that than others, but that's one way that happens. The other piece is everyone just starts using more on PON, and at some point you run out of capacity. But we've anticipated that. What we will do in those cases is we will split the PON. So you'll just say there were 32 people on here. We'll make that 2 PONs, turn that into 16, and we monitor the overall usage of the PONs. We make that available again to our ISPs. Any ISP can say what is the capacity usage on the PON for this customer. They can't see what the traffic patterns are for other ISPs, but they can say, George, his service number is 800. Tell me about the PON that he's on. And we come back and say, it's green, it's running at 20%, or it's amber, it's like 80%. And then we do something about that. Right.
Thank you.
So do you have a contention ratio that you have to balance down, not overload?
We will have at some point, but today, the networks, any of the operators will tell you the networks are not running hot. Right.
We must be getting closer to final questions, but
it's sort of follows on a bit from that question on traffic and load. So I think it was about four years ago, maybe, the BBC chairman stood up at one of the Edinburgh TV festivals and he said, in the 2030s, we won't be delivering our live TV content via broadcast anymore. It's all going to go over networks. At which point people like Peter Bell are thinking, what's going to happen here? And so I just wondered if that kind of happens, are you anticipating a resurgence of multicast and techniques like that to help that?
Well, look, we've got multicast capability which we could deploy, but to date, I don't think that's anything anybody wants, right? The BBC is going to do unicast, right? That's the only way that makes sense. That's how the world works now, right? No one sits and watches a multicast stream of the football. They pause the football, so they can go to the bathroom, they come back and they watch it, right? There are no shared experiences left anymore, right? No one is sitting around discussing who killed JR. No one is talking about what happened in the last episode of Game of Thrones, right? Those shared cultural experiences are being pulled apart because on-demand is the way that we watch television now, right? And the BBC is going to end up in an on-demand world, not in a multicast world.
Unless it's live sport, I mean, we see a lot with in the Premier League stuff and things, on Amazon and Champions League and stuff like that. That is live, and in the moment that's manageable. But if that kind of thing is a shared event, and if that amplified, I guess it depends how many events like that happen.
Yeah, then the complexity of running multicast versus just dealing with more traffic capacity. Look, Ethernet won because it just got faster all the time. Right? It didn't win because it managed the traffic better. It just said, as soon as things get bad, I'm going to multiply the volume by 10, right? And I think that's what's going to happen with these PON networks. We're not going to manage it with complicated network structures. We're not going to have multicast. We're just going to make them faster. And that'll solve the problem.
One final question here, Dave.
It is a good one. I live not quite in the middle of nowhere, but close to it. BT already has fibre there. Last week, CityFibre, you said, I think, that you were looking not to overbuild. Last week, CityFibre were digging up the street again through Summersham, which is basically overbuilding. Not only that, they're then going up a hill place, to the best of my knowledge, the only person who lives there is a madman.
That donkey has a Netflix subscription. Why am I doing that?
Yeah. Why are you digging up the roads again? I don't really care about the donkey.
So this will be part of our BDUK commitments, right? The rural, we won some contracts to deliver this stuff, and the government asked us to connect a bunch of remote locations. It may be that we don't connect your house because you're not part of the program, but the madman at the end of the road probably isn't connected by BT, and as a result, we have to go out there.
I don't think it's connected to reality.
We'll check when we install his service. But, you know, there is some miscoordination through that process, right? The BDUK program kind of took a snapshot at a point in time and said, here's all the black spots. And then like 2 years later, when you start executing on that plan, people have built network in the interim through that. There's some inefficiency. They are trying very hard to minimize that inefficiency. But that is almost certainly the reason it'll be a BDUK commitment.
Any more questions from you, Ian? Can I? Okay, one last one, Nick.
On the BDUK theme, I know CityFibre will bid for some contracts and won them. So do you feel a little bit cheated when you see some of the other altnets have bid and won contracts and not fulfilled them because effectively they're taking something that you could have had? You know, don't you feel like there's any real penalties for them in not delivering?
Yeah, you know, I think you'll have to go back to BDUK. That didn't take anything from us, right? The BDUK said, if you want to build these homes, I have this much money to allocate to you, and we went after that pot. The fact there's a different pot over here that didn't get spent doesn't really affect us in that sense.
So you got the pots you want to.
Yeah, the ones we could afford to build at a sensible price and kind of structured. Yeah, I think there are some questions around why those people were allowed to win and then were unable to deliver. In some cases, that's because they shouldn't have won something. They were unable to do that thing, given their financing. But in other cases, it's because a decision taken 18 months ago when this much network was available, somebody else came along and overbuilt that network, and now that's no longer viable, and so circumstances have changed. I think if you want to ask some questions, it's about, you know, why was it all of a sudden sensible for somebody else to go roll out into these rural locations that previously were impossible to cover and ridiculously expensive. So.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Clayton. Can I ask that we thank Clayton in the normal way for a very interesting... on the Q&A as well.
Pleasure.
Could I ask you to click the slides on one?
Oh, this is turned off, that's why.
There we go. So thank you to all attendees. Thank you particularly to those online, because I know we had an audio glitch at the start, which we will learn the lessons from. But thanks for your attendance and thanks for your questions at the end. It was clearly working at the end. I just wanted to make sure that you were aware that there are a few upcoming events. We have Kevin Hawley, who's Industry Standards Director and a distinguished engineer at BT, who will talk about the history of text messaging. We have an online-only event in April on the cavity magnetron, given by Professor Peter Grant, who's Emeritus Professor at the University of Edinburgh. And we think that one will link nicely to a visit that we plan on 20th of May to Bodsey Radar Museum. For more details on how to register, please visit our NGEC site. So the URL is noted there. For those of you who wish to, you can photograph the QR code and that will find the URL for you. And you can always look at our site for upcoming news beyond that. So without further ado, thank you very much for a great talk, Clayton. I thoroughly enjoyed that. And thank you to all of the audience, online and face-to-face. Thank you.